So formally, once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to ace GMAT reading comprehension. My name is Rajat Sudan. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Sandeep, who is a GMAT strategy expert, and he's going to be a co-host. We should have Harsha, who should be joining us today as well, and he'd be our co-host today too. In this webinar, we're going to focus on a few key things. We're going to focus on my primary focus is going to be on helping you learn a few key reading strategies that can help improve your comprehension and then hence improve your overall ability in an RC. We did have so since it's a fairly application focused webinar, we did have a few free concepts that we sent your way. They were on main point 1 and 2, and my apologies, I don't know, for some reason it seems like, well, we can now see them. You can see the links to these video lessons on main point. With each one of these video lessons had corresponding exercises that help evaluate your learning over here. If you've not gone through these, they are a part of your free trial, so post this session, do go through them. Also, we have some upcoming free sessions. We have a free session on GMAT. Actually, we have a quant workshop, which is tomorrow. How many of you over here need help in quant? Let me just ask a yes no question over here. How many of you need help in quant? So if you need help in quant, this quant workshop, and we have a couple of upcoming free quant sessions, both those things are going to help you. So in this workshop, what you would really figure out is, hey, what's your current quant score? So what's a good estimate of your current quant score? But beyond that, it'll also tell you which subsections are limiting your score. So do you need more help in number properties or geometry? So that's what we call as a level 1 analysis, and there'll be a level 2 analysis where we'll look at and say, hey, which habits are limiting your score? When you look at a question, do you get to solving right away? Do you not take constraints into account? Are you not considering all cases while solving data sufficiency questions? So what are those two or three key habits that are limiting your improvement in quant over here? So this is tomorrow, 24 hours from now. You can click on the register now button and to get to that. And then for those of you who need help in critical reasoning, we have a critical reasoning webinar a week from now, which is on 28th of November, Saturday. And in this webinar, we'll look at how to pre-think assumptions. Pre-thinking is a core skill in critical reasoning, very akin to meaning and sentence correction and comprehension and reading comprehension. And in this webinar, we're going to introduce what pre-thinking is. We're going to look at how to apply pre-thinking on assumption questions, and we're going to solve some of the most challenging questions using this approach. And we're going to demonstrate how, when you use this approach, these questions start to become very simple. Okay, with that, let's just clear this area up. And now we have Harsha, who's going to be supporting us as well during this webinar. So you have two co-hosts over here. So let's get to know you guys a bit better. Let's figure out, when do you plan to take the GMAT, and then what is your target GMAT score. Let's get that data point over here as well, and let's figure out what your current GMAT score is as well, or rather what your current ability level in what's your current ability level in RC. Let's do that. With regards to when do people plan to take their tests, we essentially have two large groups. One is those who have their test in 15 to 13 days. Presumably, if you belong to that group, you are aiming for round 2 over there. It's about 49 of you. And you have folks who have more than 60 days. That's about 64 of you over here. And then out of all of these, but other than that, you can really see we have upwards of 25 students in every group. So we have a fairly good representation from every group or every segment over here. Then with regards to the target GMAT score, 40% of you are in that 730 to 750 bucket. Another 20% are in that 760 or higher bucket. And then you have those 26% in that 710, 720. And then in the 600 to 700 bucket, there are about 16% of you. So it's great. With regards to the current ability level in RC, which is where I think you can really see the actually three large groups over here. 50 to 60% is about 20. That's about 23%. If you lower than 40%, that's about 22%. And then some of you are there in that 60 to 80% as well. So that's again, other than greater than 80%. You have a fair representation on every segment, and also we have a few folks who don't know their RC abilities. With that, let's go right into the webinar, and let me just clear this. So you should be seeing a presentation that says reading comprehension. I'm going to actually take about 8 to 9 minutes to really talk about, hey, why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher over here? And because most of you are aiming for that score, but getting to that score does become difficult. So I'm going to talk about why should you stay motivated towards that journey of 730 or higher score. And again, at a very high level, that score of 730 or higher gets you about $500,000 in additional net worth over a 10-year period. And this is, in my opinion, this is a conservative number. The actual number is actually slightly higher. And again, look at why that happens or what causes this. One is if you're aiming for a top B school, they now require that score. If you're looking to not pay a whole lot for your MBA, you need that score over here. And there's a lot of scholarship money to be had. And then when you look at the delta in total earnings between someone who graduates from a top school versus someone who graduates from a tier 2 school, that delta is close to $500,000. Again, and according to me, this is a conservative number. This delta is only going to go up as we move forward. And this number has been growing, and it's the highest that it has ever been today, even in a pseudo recession that we are in. So when you look at some of these stats with regards to why do evidence that B schools require high scores or top B schools require higher scores now has some trend of where median scores are trending towards. What you see is two things. One is you don't have Harvard and Stanford over here. In fact, you don't even have Wharton over here. And the second thing which is there is that this trend is only till 2018, but even beyond that, the trend has somewhat continued over there. The reason why you don't have Harvard, Stanford, Wharton in this case is that because they were in 2014, they were already around that 730 mark. Now, overall, when you look at stats, you'd really see this. You'd see these three things. For 23 out of top 25 schools, these median scores have trended up. Schools such as Sloan and Columbia, they are 80% of the incoming class with a score of 700 or higher. And this trend happened despite a 15% decline in test taking population. Now, this year in 2020, it's the first year when we've seen an increase in test taking population over here. And this is something which is even beyond top 25. If you're not aiming for that top 25, you can really see that some of the biggest score increases have been for tier 2 schools in that 26 to 50 bracket. Essentially, whatever is true for tier 1, tier 2, actually just the trend continues over there. So this is statistical data, some anecdotal data over here. So some of our former students, Nishant, scored a 690, was rejected by TARC and a bunch of other schools, improved his score to a 740, got multiple admits. Okay, and the two schools that give you feedback, TARC, you apply to them, they'll always give you feedback. SMEAL will give you feedback, and then they told him, it says the candidacy is not an issue, improve your GMAT score. Pravi scored a 680. Applied to a bunch of schools, didn't get a single interview invite, improved that score to a 740, got 7 interview invites within 7 hours. So this is didn't even apply again, by the way. And again, you can see the admits that she's received over here. KK applied in round 2 with a score of 680, was rejected by every school, improved to 720, applied in round 3 to a bunch of these schools over here, and got full ride, not just red merch, but full ride from pretty much every school he applied to. Again, bottom line is, GMAT score is more important today than it has ever been. Even in the world where a few schools have really said, hey, you don't need to submit your GMAT score, what you would really see is that people who have that GMAT score do have a decided advantage over those who don't. The second reason is, that scholarship money, which I think, in my opinion, is the most important reason. Why? Because beyond an admit, that scholarship gives you an instant return on investment. And USB schools do give out about $350 million worth of scholarships every year. and European B schools about 50 million or so. So based on our estimates, and e-GMAT does get about $40 million worth of scholarship every year. And so that's a fairly statistically significant number. So it allows us to get a very good sampling of it. Based on our estimates, about 55% of all of this 350 million goes to people who score 740 or higher. And pretty much all of this money goes to folks who get to a score of 710 or higher, which, I mean, if you do a math, if you get to a score of 740 or higher, this is kind of the median scholarship amount that you would get over there. And there are two factors that decide your scholarship. One is your GMAT score, and the second is your likability during the interview. Here's again some anecdotal data for this. So this is statistical data that I shared. This is anecdotal data, which means, singular cases. Mansi scored a 770, got a $90,000 scholarship from Harvard. Victor scored a 770, again got full ride from both Harvard and from Ross and Keenan Flagler over here, which is UNC. Again, these two schools don't give out full scholarships that easily. Okay. Kong Bui scored 144, scored a 760. He got 5 full rides. From Ohio Fisher, he got a very unique deal. He not only got, a full fellowship, he also got money. So the school paid him about $1,700 a month to study at Ohio Fisher. So he got money in his pocket. Nishant, again, we talked about this, and you can see the scholarship amounts that they've gotten over here. Here's another example of a student which kind of really, what I call as is a differential analysis of a student who scored 710, applied to both Columbia and Ross, and the 710 did really well in the interview, but was still waitlisted. And so he reached out to these schools and said, hey, what happened? I mean, we really connected during the interview. I think there was a really good fit. What happened? And the school said, we like your candidacy, but your GMAT score is not there yet. So he prepared again. He improved his score to 750. Didn't even apply again, just told the schools, this is my new score. Here's the official score report. Should be getting it within a week. And the same schools that had waitlisted him at 710 admitted him with a $90,000 scholarship. So converting a waitlist into a scholarship without even applying again. And you can see many such instances. Actually, our YouTube channel has right now 120 such instances over there. And these are unedited interviews that you can watch on our YouTube channel. Actually, is the largest collection of success stories anywhere in the world when it comes to the GMAT. I mean, probably 10x is what you'd get with an average prep company. And this is a quote by John Fuller, who says, someone with a score of 770 is way more likely to get a financial award. Why? Because the business school would want to buy that high GMAT score. The third reason, so, if these two reasons were not enough, here's another very important reason why. Because sometimes your brain will tell you, okay, settle for a tier 2 school, it seems good enough, the starting salary seems high enough, and so on and so forth. So I've done a very simple calculation for you. I've compared two schools, Babson and MIT. And both these schools are in Boston, Massachusetts, and they are 20 miles apart. Okay, so, and about 60% of graduates from both these schools get admits or rather get jobs within the New England area. So arguably they have access to very similar sort of opportunities. Now, when you look at the median starting salaries, they're very, very different. You look at the starting bonus or sign-on bonus, that's very different as well. So their first year compensation, the delta is about $50,000 or $60,000 or so. Now, even if you consider that the delta is about $45,000, why? Because you won't get a sign-on bonus every year, and you really scale it over a 10-year period, that leads to about $450K or so. And these are two schools located 20 miles away. So again, motivation for you. Now, the thing which is there is, about 15 years ago, this delta and this delta were not as much. The difference in starting salaries and the difference in sign-on bonuses, the delta has been increasing quite a bit. In fact, about 15 years ago, instead of being 60,000, this delta was only about $20,000 or so. So what has happened is that top companies have come to recognize that graduates from top business schools are worth a lot more, and hence they're willing to pay them much higher starting salaries, and consequently also going forward much higher pay increases. Okay, again, the three reasons summarized. I think you guys have this over here. With that, again, we do have some slots where we do help you. Getting to that high GMAT score does require a personalized study plan, a study plan that's personalized to your own strengths and weaknesses. So we do have some slots open to help do that, get that personalized study plan, which you can work with a mentor to do that. We do open some slots for this session. So if you want to do that, you can click on that, get your personalized study plan, and book a slot. With that, let's talk about this targetability. How do you build that targetability to get to that score of 730 or higher? Okay. So first question, how do you approach your GMAT, an RC passage today? Let me put in a poll question. And let me hide this over here. We can look at this later on. So let's put in a poll question. How do you approach RC today? Tell us about your RC approach. What do you do when you first see a passage? What's step one? What's step two? What's step three? And if you really say you read a certain way, it'd be great if you can describe that. That will help us. Okay, I have a good number of responses over here, upwards of 30 responses. Understand the passage, read the passage. Some of you skim it. A few of you find the opinion and tone of the passage. Some of you go by keywords. Some of you actually do it very slowly. Some of you visualize, which is great. Read to understand, anticipate, highlight, and make notes. Great. So this is, I really like how you guys are doing this over here. So in this webinar, what we want to do is we want to do all of this, but we want to do it in a much more strategic way, in a manner in which what I want to do is I want to make sure that that you're able to use this to extract way more out of an RC passage than what you do today. And to understand what we do today, let's establish a baseline, and this is what I call as a self-evaluation. And I want you to tell me, based on what you do today, what's the level of understanding that you have before when you read an RC passage, according to you, based on how you evaluate yourself. What is the level of understanding that you would rate yourself at when you get to an RC passage? Okay. Let's get a few more. I have 100 responses so far. I want to get to at least 140 responses. I have 120 responses, and let's get to 140 responses before I share I share the results. All right, 147. You can really see how people polled on this. So two big groups between 70 and 90, and between 50 and 70, or 75 and 90, and between 50 and 75 over here. And you can really see how people polled around this. So my goal really is to say, for those of you, even those of you who are in that 70 to 90, or those of you who say complete understanding, my goal is to really help you guys get way more out of it than you get today. Over here, and the way we do this is we're going to introduce certain reading strategies and that are there. Now, may have heard of these strategies. You probably wouldn't have seen these strategies apply the same way as we are going to really do that. So we're going to demonstrate how to extract those insights out of it through small passages over here. Okay. Then we're going to really see, okay, once you extract this, how do you use that information to answer questions? So the beauty of this is, if you do this step right, And if you have a basic understanding of what's tested in GMAT RC, this step is actually a cakewalk. It takes, 70% of your time is spent over here. And again, even though the mathematically it should be 30%, of the time should be spent over here, but rarely what you would see is it's not even 30%, it's less than 30%. Now, if you're smart and if you have great inference skills, what you should infer from this is, if you do that well, you actually can get through RC very quickly. But to save time on RC, you have to do this slowly. Step one needs to be done slowly over there. And again, we will apply this method on not just short RC passages, but also on a full length RC passage over here. Okay. So the one thing that I want to do is, the first thing I want to tell you is I'm going to talk about all of these strategies. I'm going to really discuss these strategies over there. But, if you want to extract twice as much information as you currently do from an RC passage, the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that you have the right attitude to get into RC. Why? Because when I asked, how much do you absorb from an RC passage, the first response that I got was that, hey, it depends on whether the passage is interesting. And yes, I'm sure that happens with many of you, right? If a passage is interesting, you extract a lot out of it. If it's not interesting, you don't extract a lot out of it. Does that happen? Does the topic matter to many of you? But 80% of you say topic matters to how you perform on GMAT RC. And factually, that's absolutely correct. It does happen, and we've seen that happen many a times. But the reason it happens is not because is more to do with your attitude towards that than to do with the topic of the passage itself, especially if you're attempting high quality passages. Now, GMAT RC is very well written. The passage in GMAT RC is really well written. It's written with an intent. And if you have the right attitude, what you're going to find is that the story that a passage in science tells and the story that a passage in humanities tells, that story is equally interesting in both those cases. And you'd be able to generate that level of interest if you have the right attitude. So the first thing you've got to tell yourself is, I am interested in this. So get immersed in that passage. The second thing is, don't rush through it. Someone asked the question, it's difficult for me to read the passage in 1 to 4 minutes. By the way, first of all, that's a very wide range. But the other piece which is there is that if you try and rush through the passage, you won't visualize this. And if you don't visualize it, you will take longer. So have the attitude that this is something that you're interested in. And as you're reading, focus on visualizing what you're reading. And we're going to demonstrate that today. Because if you don't have the right attitude, you will not be able to visualize. How will we do that? How will we get to that visualization? We are going to follow these reading strategies that we've been talking about, and we're going to apply them at an atomic level, which is at a sentence structure level or at a sentence level. The second thing that we will do is we're going to, as we read sentences, we're going to predict our thoughts through keywords. The full-length passage that we do today will have about 18 keywords, and I'm going to underline each one of those keywords. And we're going to look at how the passage is progressing within a paragraph as well as between paragraphs. And we're going to stop and summarize frequently so that we make sure that we develop that level of understanding. And we'll do all of these things very slowly. So with that, what I want to do is I want to give you a small passage over here, and I want you to read that passage and enter your summary notes. So give me 1 second and get my short answer poll over here. And I'm going to remove broadcast results, but as you read the passage and you press enter, I would still get them, but to make sure that your responses don't bias someone else, I'm gonna broadcast these results towards the end. So take about a minute and a half to read this. All right, get those responses in. Let's look at that. I want to see a few more responses. I have a total of about 25 responses or so, or 26, 27. Let's get to about 30 responses. All right, let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. And again, guys, don't put your responses in the Q&A pod. The Q&A pod is for your questions. It is not for your responses. When you put your question in the Q&A pod, you maintain anonymity. You actually, allows Harsha and Sandeep to respond to your questions. But again, scroll through these responses and you can really see the range of responses. Someone has said it shows different aspects of how humans think. The others have said, hey, this talks about ethnocentrism. It's what definition of ethnocentrism. Some of you have actually been a bit more precise. They talk about one definition of ethnocentrism over here. So with that, I think it's a really good thing for you to now, since you have a fair understanding of this passage, I want you to tell me which answer choice is the right answer. And before I do that, what I do in this is I do this thing where I look at still solving. So I want about 70 people to say still solving, and that way when you choose an answer choice other than still solving, I know you guys are done, and that's when I will call time. 65, 7, 69, 70. Great. Let me remove broadcast results. Here are the poll questions. All right, most of you are done. Get those responses in. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. And I'm going to broadcast the results. And this is how you guys are. It's really good. 52% of you chose choice D as the correct answer. The next most popular choice was choice C. 14% of you chose choice B, and then a few of you chose choice A. That's great. So let's kind of look at this. The author says bordering on the extreme, one definition of EC or ethnocentrism. So one of the things which you have to understand when it comes to GMAT RC is that there are no brownie points for pronouncing a word properly. So whenever you see a long word, just compress it and say, I'm going to really say ethnocentrism as EC. And again, my pen is not working properly, but yeah, EC. So it says bordering on one extreme, on the extreme, one definition, and the key thing which is there is one definition of EC considers it a schismatic in-group, out-group differentiation. So let's pause over here. When you look at this in this case, and I'm going to put in that short answer poll over here, that definition that the author is presenting, is the author defining ethnocentrism, or is the author merely communicating information? So what is the author doing? If you just pause over here at this point, is he defining EC, or is he communicating? Okay, he's presenting a fact. He's merely communicating information. He is not defining ethnocentrism. Everyone clear with this? He says, the author says bordering on the extreme, which means it's an extreme definition. One definition of EC considers it some form of a differentiation in which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, and devotion to the in-group are correlated. Correlated means they happen together with a state of hostility towards the out-groups, which are often perceived, which means this corresponds to out-groups over here are often perceived as subhuman or the incorporation of evil. So when you look at this, you say, hey, the author presents or gives a definition of EC. It's not his definition, and the author is merely communicating information, and the author really tells us that this is an exaggerating definition. So he gives a view on that definition over there, and then he says, as per this definition, EC is where two things happen. One is love for your own people happens together with hatred towards outside. So how would it sound? So I think first of all, guys, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A pod, because before I get to it, Harsha will get to it. So not in the short answer pod over here, but how would it sound if he were to define DC? So then the author here, if he were to define DC, then the author would simply say EC is defined as DE. So that's how, or EC is X, Y, and Z. So if the author were to really give his definition over there, okay. So or EC is X, Y, and Z, and this is a really important differentiation over there. And we're going to look at this. So the author presents one definition. Now I would summarize this. One definition of EC indicates that it's a bit exaggerated, and two things happen as per this. One is love for your own people, and then hatred for outside, and both of them are correlated. Okay. So let's look at the questions over here, and I'm going to bring back how you guys polled in this case. EC is ethnocentrism. We're just using a short form. There's no point writing the entire thing out. Okay. So I think at this point, it may be a good idea to really say, when you look at this part over here, when you read the passage and you look at this over here, 1, 2, and 3, this is this 1, 2, and 3 over here. Let me get my pen, sorry. 1, 2, and 3. Which were the parts that you did not get when you read this small passage over here? Which were the parts? And this is a multi-response poll, which means you can select more than one. What is the inference to be drawn? The inference to be drawn is that this definition is a bit exaggerated. So this is not the most precise definition of EC. It's an extreme definition of EC over here. And you can really see 84% of you who are responding really say they couldn't get the exaggerated part over there. Again, if you got all three of them, select choice 3. And the reason why this is important is even if you got the answer correct, even if you answered it correctly, if you didn't get everything out of it, there's a chance when you get a similar passage, you might make a mistake. Okay, so let's look at how you guys polled for this particular question. And let me look at your poll responses over here. Select poll, and here is Q1. Let me hide this. And here is Q1. This is how you guys polled. You can really see choice A, very few people chose. Choice A says to criticize the concept of EC, what the concept that encourages hostility towards people not belonging to this. And this is wrong on two counts. First of all, the author doesn't say EC is bad. He doesn't criticize the concept of EC. So to criticize something is to really say that that thing is bad. And the second thing is, the author doesn't really say that EC encourages hostility towards people not belonging. What the author really says, the one definition says that these two things are correlated. Okay, it doesn't mean that the hostility happens because of EC. Okay, let's look at choice B, but 26 of you chose choice B. Choice B uses the word evaluate, and stuff in red is wrong over here. So what does evaluate mean? When you evaluate something, what do? When you evaluate something, you figure out its pros and cons. When you evaluate a stock, you really say, hey, the benefit of buying a stock is X, Y, and Z, and the downside is A, B, and C. So evaluate in your mind. Think of evaluate as looking at pros and cons, and so in this case, does the author give pros and cons of EC? Does the author say EC is good because of X, Y, and because of these reasons, and EC is bad because of these reasons? No, the author doesn't do that. So the author definitely doesn't evaluate that, and then the author also doesn't list the various features of EC. And again, listing various features of EC means to really say that the author would have said that when someone who's ethnocentrist, okay, would first break up with their neighbors who are not from the same background. The second thing that they would do is essentially they would put their kids in schools where essentially all people belonging to the same background study. Kids from so those are the features, and the author doesn't do any of it. What the author really says, one definition of this is that is this. So he doesn't list its various features. It's just the definition that is presented. Okay. So again, for both these reasons, you can really see why choice B is incorrect. Choice C says to define the concept of ethnocentrism, which leads to hierarchy among groups. So the author doesn't define the concept, the author presents a definition. To present a definition and to define something, those are two very different things. Okay, over there. And that definition doesn't lead to hierarchy among social groups. First of all, there is no mention of hierarchy among social groups. It's what is mentioned is love for in-group and hatred for out-group. But and this is where RC will actually mess up with your mind. And I'm going to really present the passage over here so that you guys can look at that. Let's see if we can get P2, because I have my passage 3 and passage 4. Okay, let's get my P2. Just give me once my P1 over here. And yeah, here is my P1. All right. Okay. So how do we know it's an extreme definition? Because the author says bordering on the extreme. Okay, and it's one definition of EC. All right. So that's how we know the author is not defining it, which means that this part is wrong. The author is not defining the concept of ethnocentrism. And then again, as you can see, there's no hierarchy mentioned over here. choice D, which is my correct choice, is to introduce. When you look at this passage, you definitely now, prior to this, you didn't know EC. But now that the author has mentioned this, you definitely know something about EC. So you've been introduced to the concept of EC, and the author presents a view and says this is an extreme form of EC over here, because it says bordering on one extreme, one definition. Okay, bordering on the extreme. Bordering on the extreme means it's an extreme. It means it's not the most balanced definition, Palak. It means it's an extreme definition. What's the difference between presenting and defining a concept? It's actually a really important question. It's a huge question. Okay, what's the difference between these two sentences over here? I'm going to really do that. What's the difference between these two sentences over here? Sentence one, and if you are the author who's written both these sentences, what is the difference? You can put that in the short answer part. What do you think? What is one? In one, I am presenting information. So in this sentence, and I'm going to put this in blue over here, or purple, whatever it is. The first is presenting Gartner's view. So Gartner is a research firm, by the way, for those of you who don't know. And the second is presenting your own view. So if you say Gartner says that manufacturing companies should invest, and your boss, so and then after this, if your boss in AI and the investment fail, then you are not to blame. Okay, but in this case, if your boss invests in AI and that investment fails, then what's going to happen? If in scenario 2, what's going to happen? You'll be fired. Yes, you are to blame. Most likely you will be fired. By the way, if your boss invests in AI and the investment comes out, then you don't get the credit in case A. In case B, you get the credit. So you take the upside, you take the downside, both. Is that clear? What does this mean? Okay. So this is really critical. And when you think about GMAT RC, these are the concepts in GMAT RC that you need to learn. There are no grammar concepts here, but this is about understanding and to really understand. When you say understand author's intent, this is what you mean by that. Okay. So now a few very important, very important terms over here. Let's look at this. So what is correlation, coincidence, and causality? What does that mean? These are terms that are super important to the GMAT. Coincidence means that two terms may not have a direct connection, they just happen together. Okay. Correlated means that there is some connection, but one may not cause the other. Okay. And causality means that one directly causes the other. And causality is the strongest form of relationship. Correlation is less strong than causality, but it's stronger than coincidence. Okay. So for example, when I look at this over here, if I tell you a sentence, Netflix consumption goes up when it snows. Okay. Now, is snowing directly causing the increase in consumption of Netflix or the content consumption in Netflix? No, they're correlated, right? When it snows, people probably spend more time at home, and essentially, which means they have more time to watch TV. So that's an example of correlation over here. Okay. Similarly, I mean, what I'm trying to really say is a lot of people think, okay, how do you really say an event is correlated? Because essentially everything seems causal over there. And here is an example where you can really say. So similarly, you can say takeout sales go up when it snows, but really the causality behind that is when people spend more time at home and they can't go out to restaurants, that's when takeout sales go up. And snowing is merely a scenario in which that happens. Okay. So with that, do we have a better understanding of what does it take to ace GMAT RC? Are we getting the sense of it? Okay. All right, good. Guess so is good enough for this point. We just did a mini passage so far. But the thing that I want you to really say is it's not about rushing through the passage. It's about understanding and reading the passage from the point of view of the author. And when you do that, you're going to find that you reach that next level of understanding over there. Okay. So many of you are saying yes, some of you are saying no, and some of you are a bit more confused, but many of you are way more confident. So let's kind of bring more and more people into this group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another small passage. It's a related passage, but consider it to be completely independent. And then let's see how you do this. So again, read the passage, enter your summary notes, and then let's see what you get out of it. All right. Let's get those responses. 3, 2, and 1. Let's broadcast the results. I'm going to let you read this. And you can really see the variety, and then we're going to do this because I want to give you a poll over here. So let's select poll. Let's get to Q2 over here, and gonna hide this. And here is my Q2. Remove broadcast results, and here is the poll. And I'm going to give you the passage as well so you guys can see the passage. Here is P2. Here is the passage over here. All right, last 20 seconds, guys. Five, four, three, two, and one. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results, and you can see this over here that we already have a split jury. So both these questions are around the 700 level over here. Even though these are very small passages, these questions go to a reasonable degree of depth that puts them in that 700 level quadrant. So you can really see choice B is the most popular choice. Choice D, E, and A are all three of these choices are very popular. Okay. Now, question. I think I'm going to really put in my notes, take my notes part over here, and I want you to tell me. Let's just create new. And if I were to give you a statement, the okay, so I have two options, and let's bullet. If the passage is the color blue is considered to be soothing, and if I give you two options, the color blue is soothing, and the second is some people consider color blue to be soothing, then which one would you consider to be the correct? Is it 1 or is it 2? You can put those responses in here. What would you infer? Which of these two choices? One is color blue is soothing, two is some people consider the color blue to be soothing. Let me end the poll. 132 responses, 133 responses, and you can really see 17% of you choose choice A, but an overwhelming majority chooses the second choice, which is correct, that the color blue is considered to be, or some people consider the color blue to be soothing. You can't really say that the author is saying that the color blue is soothing. Why? Because it's the information given to you is the color blue is considered to be soothing. So the same principle is applied over here, and the same principle is tested again and again on GMAT RC. So let's kind of look at this over here. EC and its canonical variants are deemed to be. Deemed to me means considered to be intimately connected with XP. A complex attitude cum sentiment structure involving something over here. So let's kind of look at this, and this is an inference question, so I'm going to draw a parallel sentence over here, and I'm going to write down a simplified parallel sentence, and I want you to tell me what would you infer from this sentence. So if I gave you this, and it's going to come up very soon over here, if I gave you this sentence, I'm going to give you a short answer pod. So this is your passage, this is the passage that's given to you. What would you infer from this? And here is your short answer pod, wherein you can put in your answers. The passage says Google, an internet company, is considered a good boy. What would you infer from this? You can really see, you can see the range of responses over here. So I'm going to tell you what's right versus what's wrong. I'll remove broadcast results. So if you really say, I'm going to say correct responses over here. So in this case, if I were to ask correct responses, they would be over here. Google is an internet company. And then the second correct response will be some people consider Google a good buy. Okay, so that's my other correct response. Incorrect responses would be Google is a good boy or Google is a good investment. Okay, the second thing which is there is that statement. Some of you have already said most people that will also be an incorrect response. Okay, so is that clear? The correct and incorrect responses, again, remember this over here. What the author is saying is Google, an internet company, is considered a good boy, good buy. Why do I say? I keep on saying a good boy, a good buy, and so what you can really infer from this is that Google is an internet company, and the thing is, at least some people consider it to be a good buy, but you can't infer that the author is recommending that. Again, very similar to what we did in the previous question over here, and you guys really got that. Okay, so in the same way, when you look at this over here, EC and its canonical variants are intimately connected with XP. What is XP? And a complex attitude blah 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 structure which involving aversion slash dislike and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange or the alien. This is the part that the author is telling you to be a fact. This is similar to Google and an internet company, and everything that the stranger or alien represents. Okay, so what the author is saying is EC and its variants are considered to be closely connected, and XP to XP, and XP entails hatred for aliens. Okay. Now, then the author goes on to say some anthropologists even. What's the power of why did the author use the word even over here? What is he linking this? Even considered XP and EC to be the opposite sides of the same coin. What contrast? What emphasis that is he trying to say? What is he trying? The first statement. Who said that? That's really good. That's some of you are really getting it. Let's just look at that. Who said the first statement? Karis, you really are getting it. No, it's not a negative emphasis over here. What this is to really say, and you look at the first line. In this case, the first line is EC and its variants are considered to be intimately connected with XP. So there is a group of people that consider them to be that consider EC over here and XP to be intimately connected, to be closely connected. Then the author says, in addition to that, some socio-cultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC to be the opposite sides of the same coin. I think that there's this other group that thinks that connection is so close that they are frankly the same thing. Opposite sides of the same coin means they're frankly the same things. But, which is a contrast keyword, a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. So when you're visualizing this, you're really saying, okay, there is this group of people who consider EC. So this is a score group which consider EC and XP to be very closely related, to be intimately connected over here. Out of this group over here, there are these that really say that, hey, they're basically identical. So these are basically identical, but then there is this other group also that caution that this need not be the case. Now, when you read this paragraph, can you really see that? that the usage of word even over here. So this is really saying some sociocultural anthropologists even consider, means they're so closely connected, so intimately connected that they are opposite sides of the same coin. Short answer poll, can you guys see that? Okay, and that's where you've got to do that linkages to say, why does the author look at even over here? Okay, over here. So in this case, the author defines a new term XP and then says there's a group of people that that consider that they're closely connected over there. And then it says some experts think that they're so closely connected that they coexist, but some of those other experts think otherwise. Okay. Okay. From this point over, I can read some sociocultural anthropologists even consider, so the word even means it's an emphasis word over here, even consider XP and EC to be opposite sides of the same coin, which means they're connected to such a close degree. Why? Because we are taking this cue from this intimately connected over here. So they're connected to such a close degree that they're opposite sides of the same coin. Okay. Shantanu, hopefully that helps. Okay, but others, a few voices have cautioned that that such a close connection need not be the case. Opposite sides of the same coin mean they're practically the same thing. Okay, opposite sides of the same coin means they're practically the same thing. It's the same coin, remember? All right. With that, let's kind of look at your poll responses. Let's talk about a correct inference. What's a correct inference? A correct inference is something that the authors agrees with. So one of the things that I really think about when I think about correct inference is to say, hey, that what is it that I would bet my money 100% on if I were a betting person? And so it's something that the author would agree with. You can't really infer something on which the author has not provided an opinion. So unless and until the question really explicitly asks you to do that. But if there's no mention of that in the question, then you can't infer something that the author hasn't given, on which the author hasn't given any agreement. And then remember this, in a passage, if a fact is presented, the author will agree with it. Why? Because on the GMAT, we don't dispute with facts. Okay, so let's look at the answer choices. Let's look at how you guys polled over here. Let me bring in the poll question. Choice A was very popular. 30 of you chose choice A. In this, choice A says XP and EC are different facets of the same concept. Okay, now this is not what the author believes in. This is a view of some experts. So we can't infer this from the passage. This is only a view of some experts. We don't know whether the author agrees with that view. We don't know whether he disagrees with that view. Okay, so for those of you who chose choice A, let's bring in a poll question over here. Do you guys understand why choice A is wrong now? This is the same example as deemed to be. Okay, that's great. Choice B, which is very popular, actually. Choice B says the canonical variants of EC are closely connected with xenophobia. Again, this is also that considered view. The author agrees with this or doesn't agree or disagree with it. We don't know if that's the case. Similarly, choices C and D are off as well. So first of all, choice B. Do you guys agree? Those of you who chose choice B, can you see that? Again, this is not the author's view. There's a question that isn't sentence be essentially directly from the text and not an inference. So I think this is another piece that another myth that I want to dispel. A lot of people really say, hey, an inference cannot be something which is directly from the passage. And in general, this comes from the very definition that an inference is supposed to kind of an higher order information extraction. And yes, from the definition, it does happen. But really, on the GMAT, the most pure form of inference is, how do we frame the inference question on the GMAT? Anyone remembers? How do we frame the information question? What can be inferred, or what's another form of information question, of inference question from critical reasoning? Must be true, yes. So on the GMAT, when it comes to inference, remember must be true. And must be true means given the information in the passage, which of these statements must be true? Okay, it doesn't require some exquisite information extraction. In fact, I've not seen a single question, and I've reviewed upwards of 11 official guides. And, at e-GMAT, we are the only prep company where we have 11 experts who work full time on it, which means they don't do anything else. They actually scour and really read the official guide front to back. There's not a single question where you'd have an answer choice which restates information from the passage and the official answer says, hey, that's not correct. Why? Because it's not extracting that higher level of information. No. On the GMAT, inference is must be true. Okay. So even if it's stated in the passage, if it comes in the answer choices, you should not reject it. Okay. Let's go back to our yes no poll. Canonical variants of EC and X are closely connected with XP. Okay. This one, this is a deemed view to be intimately connected. This is the deemed view. This is not the author's view. All right. For those of you who chose choice B, is that correct? Do you guys really understand this? If you don't understand this, put that question in the Q&A pod. And now a number of you chose choice B. The author says A and B are considered to be intimately connected with XP. Okay. Which means the author doesn't agree or disagree with this. So you can't infer this from it. Ash says, how will we come to know that this is the author's view? This is not the author's view, but if it were the author's view, then the author would simply write EC and its canonical variants are intimately connected with xenophobia. He'll remove that deemed to be. So if it were this question, Rick says, I did not know that inference means author should agree. Rick, we've been doing all of these examples. And he said, what would you infer? And we've been doing that. This is exactly the same thing. And Celine says, so when they ask about infer, it is talking about the author's point of view. Exactly, Celine, and this is exactly what I really talked about over here. Correct inference is always point of view from of the author. That's exactly the first point. Can the author mention his view in coming sentences? Absolutely, and you'll see that happen in the upcoming passages. But it's not happened in this passage. Okay. Perfect. All right, let's look at choice C over here. XP and EC are not connected with one another. Again, we don't know if the author agrees or disagrees with this, so you can't infer that. In some cases, XP could be the cause of EC. There is no causality mentioned in the passage. Okay. All right. Choice E, which is our correct answer, which is what 33 of you says. Xenophobia entails dislike towards the strange. This is exactly correct. This is what the author is saying over here. This between right from this part to this part. Remember, I had this passage over here, which I said, Google, an internet company, is considered a good buy. What could you infer out of it? That Google is an internet company. When you look at this structure, oh, where did this thing go? So this part is what the author is saying. Okay, a complex attitude cum sentiment structure involving blah, 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 and everything that the author represents. Okay. Questions about choice E. I know practically none of you chose choice E. Questions about choice E. Why did you miss it? Why did you miss this inference piece? What was the main reason? Sounded too easy, yes, and obvious. Got trapped by B. Again, it's when I really say you've got to extract, I'm going to show you how to extract twice as much. It is about understanding and reading this from the point of view of the author. We rarely you don't get what E is stating. And this is where I gave you this example over here. Let's look at this example once again. In this case, let's see if I have it, otherwise. Let's make this example. What can you infer from this? If I were to give you this sentence, the color blue, the most versatile color, is considered to be soothing. What can you infer from this? What can you infer from this? Blue is the most versatile color, right? And some people consider blue to be smoothing. So the inferences that you would draw from this are, okay, or okay. All three of these are good inferences that you can draw. Can you see that? Each one of these, yeah. Which is the same thing that we've done over here. In this case, let me just select this and passage 2. Here is the passage. The author says xenophobia, a complex attitude cum sentiment structure involving blah, 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 blah towards the strange or the alien. This is what you can really say. Xenophobia, what is xenophobia? A complex attitude cum sentiment structure, which does a bunch of these things that are mentioned over here. Which is what choice E is saying. And I'm going to, xenophobia entails dislike towards the strange. It's kind of summarizing what's there in this bolded form. Okay, that's really important. Bimal says, why you said many other colors are not as versatile on the previous example. When I said color blue, the most versatile color, is considered to be soothing. Why? Because if many other colors were just as versatile, then there's no point labeling color blue as the most versatile color. I mean, again, the other thing, the author's not stupid. Remember that over there. Okay. Option B, yes, I'll be happy to show you option B. Option B is a definitive option. The canonical variants of EC are closely connected with xenophobia. You can't say that with any certainty because the author isn't telling you that. The author is saying some people consider it to be. And this is that level of clarity. If you want to get to that 90th percentile, get to that 730 score, get that $100,000 worth of scholarship, you need to have this level of precision. And it's not complex vocab, it's sophisticated logic, it's precision, it's feedback. How many of you have done, at least 10 RC passages? How many of you have done at least 10 RC passages over here? Okay. And how many of those RC passages did you get this level of clarity as to why something's right, why something's wrong? Now, whatever we've done over here, Does it have anything to do with the fact that this is a humanities passage? Does it have anything to do with the fact? No, it's just about reading strategically. The passage type over here doesn't matter. I can, in fact, Harsh, I can really pull out a few examples right now. I can give you a sciences passage and ask such questions, and you would be wrong. If you read 10 books, will you be able to answer this question? No, it's about the depth. It's not about reading 10 books. You might be familiar with the content, you may be able to answer some detailed questions, but not these questions. Okay. So again, when it comes to acing GMAT RC, don't go towards breadth, go towards depth. Which is where some of you were asking about, okay, how do I know how much emphasis do I need in GMAT RC? And you weren't able to book that. So if you want to book that study plan, you can do that right now over here. If the links are still available. Again, if you're an e-GMAT student, write to your support team, because they can probably look at about 100 plus more data points over there. All right, with that, let's go to our full length passage over here. We're going to go towards our full length passage. I want you to get a pen and paper. I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to read that entire passage. So get a pen and paper over here, read that entire passage, and then let's get this rolling. Here is the passage, but I think it's more difficult to, it's a bit more challenging to read. So I'm going to put that passage in the notes pane. Here is the passage in my notes, in the notes pane over here. And once you're done reading the passage, I'm going to hide this. I want you to select. So can you guys really, about 50 of you, select no over here, please? So that I know when you're done reading the passage, you can choose your option from no to yes, and that way I know that you're done reading the passage. Thank you guys. So good luck, read the passage, and then we'll solve questions. Okay, it seems pretty much everyone's done. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. Let me hide this over here. And what I'm going to do is you'll still have access to this passage. Let me remove this and so you guys can continue reading. I just want to make it smaller so that I can put in a poll question over here maybe. And so you have this over here. I can start putting in my poll questions below. So we're going to solve 5 questions one after the other. Let me just put in the poll questions over here. So here's my question number 1. Let's just do this. And so you can look at the passage on the left hand side. I'm going to just resize this slightly because I think you'd still be able to read this. This gives you more real estate to read the passage over here. Here's question number 1. Let's remove broadcast results, reopen the poll, and get those responses. But 80% is done. Let's get those responses in there. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me look at this. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. This is how you guys polled over here. Let me put in my second question. Here is my second question, and here's the question over there. All right, last 10 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Gonna broadcast the results. Let's get the next question. Here's question number 3, and here is the question. All right, last 10 seconds once again. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Broadcast the results. It's wonderful. Let's get to question number 4. Here is your poll for question number 4. Here is the question. All right, last 15 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Broadcasters. Some people always wait till the end to till they put in an answer. So this is the last question for this passage over here, and here is the question. Good luck. All right, get those answers in. 3, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll. Let's broadcast the results. So let me hide this. Let's bring back our Q&A pod. Over here, we have this in here. And perfect. Let's expand the presentation pod as well. Now, so how do you guys feel? I mean, how was this passage? This was a 700 level passage. It's an official passage. And how was it going through the passage? Did it feel a bit more comfortable? Easier than the other questions. Can I explain option C? I don't know which option are we talking about, but yeah. So easier to comprehend. Good. Last two questions were not easy. Need more practice? Yes, you do. You know, if it were so easy, everyone would be getting 90th percentile, and it would no longer be 90th percentile, right? It's thank God that it's not that easy, but it's consistent. Okay. All right, so let's kind of go about this, and we'll really look at how many questions you answered correctly. I can tell you that barring the last question, the accuracy for every question was 50% or higher. And this is a passage that actually has many keywords. So let's start with this. FNM, Frazier and Mosteller. So I like to call them FNM over here. Again, as I said, there are no brownie points for pronouncing their names. Why do you want to really twist your tongue? So FNM assert, which means it's not the author who's saying, assert that medical research could be improved by moving toward larger, simpler clinical trials of medical treatments. You read that first statement, you say, okay, the author is presenting information. It's an assertion. It's a claim by someone. And who are those someone? They are FNM, and they're saying that, hey, they could improve on medical research if you move towards larger trials, if you move towards simpler trials. Okay, so that's my first keyword over here that I'm going to bookmark. Currently is a really important keyword. Currently means the current state of things. The audio should be loud and clear for most of you. Is that okay? Is the audio good? Perfect. Yes. And if you're facing audio issues, just join again over here. All right. So currently, researchers collect far more background information. There are two things that I want to make sure that you do really carefully when you're reading an RC passage. One is make sure you focus on keywords and understand what they intend to do. The second is comparisons. Comparisons on GMAT RC lead to questions. So focus on comparisons. Currently, researchers collect far more background information on patients than is again that comparison keyword is strictly required for trials. How much more? Substantially more than hospitals collect. Thereby is an important keyword. It's the outcome keyword. Thereby escalating costs of A, B, and C. I don't care about this, but escalating some costs. So I've read enough. I'm going to just summarize and say, okay, as per FNM, medical research could be improved. Why? By doing these things. We're going towards larger and simpler trials. Then he presents what happens today. Currently is really important. Researchers collect far more information, blah, 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 blah. And again, remember this part with currently is by the author. Okay, this is not by FNM. This is really important to understand. And the author is very careful about saying what FNM say. And this is highlighted by the sentence that starts with although, which is another keyword over here. Although limiting information collection could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to the study, FNM assert. FNM contend that such risk, never entirely eliminable from research, would still be small in these studies. Okay, so FNM contend what? That such risk would still be small in most studies. And then the author really says this is never entirely eliminable from research is what the author is saying. Okay. Only in research and entirely new treatments are new and unexpected variables likely to arise. So only is another keyword, which means that's the only case of the segmentation keywords. Although it's telling us that it's the author, although seems to indicate, but you've got to read the entire sentence. So if, for example, if this sentence was structured differently, and this is where sentence structure from SC is really important. If I had written, and that's a good question, all the limiting blah 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 could increase the risk. Uh, 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 okay, that's something which all the limiting information F and M content. If I had F and M content over here, right at this point, all the limiting information F and M content could increase the risk, then that part would go to F and M. But yeah, mostly keywords come from the author. How do you identify now it's the author who's saying after currently and not F and M? Because there is no representation of F and M over here. So what Palak's point is, how do you identify now its author? Currently, researchers collect far more information. You can really see where it's F and M. It's very clearly written. And Palak, if you're asking these questions, then you have to first go to the SC part. You have to understand the importance of meaning in SC. You have to understand how author uses meaning to tell his story. And if you understand that, all of this should become very logical. Palak, are you already at 90th percentile in SC? Are you already at that? No. So before doing RC, you've got to do SC. That's where the regular progression is of SC, and then you can do RC or CR. Okay. You attend some of our webinars, you'd really see this in our SC webinar broken down into even more granular stuff. Okay, but just going back over here, what I want to do is I want to make sure I show the keywords assert over here. So let's just see if I can just change the color. Keyword here, currently, than 3, 4, 5, okay, only 6. There are 6 keywords over here. Again, so overall, when you were to summarize this, and let's go back and get back to my black color, in this passage, we have an assertion about simpler trial and the benefits of those simpler trials, that those benefits are explained over here. Okay. Then let's go to the second paragraph. F and M propose, again, you can really see proper attribution to F and M over here, which means it's not the author. Again, there's a keyword, not only, but also, which means that there's going to be 2 things. Not only that researchers limit data collection on individual patients, but also that researchers enroll patients in clinical trial. Again, when you do this, when you're reading this, if you have that meaning part from SC, you can really see the parallelism, not only that, but also that. And you can reinforce those concepts, thereby obtaining a representative sample, a more representative sample of the total population. So again, when you look at this over here, thereby is an outcome keyword that you want to make sure as the output of this, where you enroll more patients, the sample that you get is much more representative than what is done today. Again, it's a comparative word. More representative means comparative. You're comparing it. Again, there could be a question around it, and there is a question around this. Often, again, another keyword. This is how things are mostly done today. Often, researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions. So inference, what are ideal conditions? Patients who have no ailments besides those. So that's kind of the inference over here, because again, you see the word these ideal means we are referring back to the prior line. Can then is a timeline keyword, which means it's a 2-step thing, be evaluated under normal conditions. Evaluated, again, an important word. When you look at this over here, and then you really see me talking about all of these keywords, How many of you are thinking, man, these are too many keywords and this is going to take a lot of time? How do you think I know what you're thinking? How do you think I know? Experience, yes, yes, experience, but also how someone who has been taught to rush through things thinks. And this is what you guys get a lot of when you really say, oh man, the key to GMAT RC is skimming through the passage. Even though most of you really just said we actually want to go in depth, but you don't focus on keywords. And you should. Why should you focus on keywords? Can you really see this, that these keywords repeat again and again in many passages? Right? They are easy to spot. They repeat, I mean, often, thereby all of these, they come back. And there's a reason why the author uses then over here. He's trying to express sequencing. He's trying to tell a story. Okay. We did a YouTube session yesterday. Let me just kind of do a little segue. When you think of verb tenses, what comes to mind? How do you approach verb tense questions in GMAT sentence correction? Okay, timeline, time frame. What else? Never done it before. Understand the timeline. Story of the author. Sequence. So you can really see a lot of you talk about sequence, and sequence is something you've got to do, but sequence only applies to past perfect and simple past. Right? What about other tenses? What about simple present and past perfect? How would you determine between them? Okay. Let me give you an example. If I were to tell you that very simple example. The dinosaurs were discovered. How would you would you express so? Thank you for correcting the spelling. My spelling are really bad. Thank you very much. So, what kind of tenses would you use in this? Okay, had been killed and their remains were discovered. Why would you use those tenses? Okay. All right. You would use those tenses to show the correct sequence of events. Let me ask you this question. Hold that. Do you need to show the correct sequence of events in this case? Is it not obvious that the remains would only be discovered after they are killed? They are not related events. And this is, it's already, the timeline is implicit. If you actually use past perfect and simple past, you will make a mistake. And this is the depth of meaning. This is an example, a simple example of a depth of meaning that is presented through sentence structures. We actually did a webinar yesterday on how to solve verb tenses questions using the storytelling method over there. Okay, let's come back. So just to really tell you, when you see all of these shortcuts and methods, as long as, if you're not thinking about it logically, if you think of them as a hammer and try applying those, you're going to fail. But if you've got to take logic into account. All right, so let's go back. Can we get the SC webinar? Yes, you can. Sandeep, can you search for that on GMAT Club and get that? Stacy's webinar from yesterday, please, and share it with everyone. Let's go back. Then let's go back to the next paragraph. F&M proposed not only, okay, again, actually we did this over here. Did we do this already? Yes. Yeah, F&M proposed not only that researchers limit data collection on, but also enroll. Yeah, we've done this. This is a repeat. Broadening the range of trial participants, F&M suggest, would enable, F&M suggest, again, you can see this is not what the author is saying, but the suggestion by F&M would enable researchers to evaluate, which means figure out pros and cons for treatment's efficacy for diverse patients under various conditions, and to evaluate, again, you can really see the parallel structures over here, its effectiveness for different subgroups. For example, the value of a treatment for a progressive disease may vary according to the patient's stage of disease. Patient's age may also affect a treatment's efficacy. Okay, so when you look at this over here, what this is where we're talking about increasing the size of trial, and what the author is saying over here is that, hey, to broadening that range of trial, the value of broadening, what is the benefit of broadening the range of trial participants? Say, you'd be able to really evaluate efficacy for patients under diverse conditions. Now, which of these examples, when you look at, for example, another keyword over here, example is another keyword. Okay. So now tell me which of these examples is about treatment's efficacy for diverse patients, and which one is for diverse patients, and which one is for subgroups over here. And let me just clear this out so that we have this. So which of these examples is for diverse patients, and which one is for different subgroups? Evaluate is not value. Evaluate means the pros and cons. Always. Which means wherever it's more effective and less effective. Okay. So, SC webinar link is coming. So, Sandeep, if you can really share it with everyone, that'd be very good. So, which of these examples, value for treatment for a progressive disease, do you think does it map to diverse patients, or does it map to subgroups? Oh, it's not different. So diverse patients means a diversity. And again, you don't have to infer this. This is just to really say, so if I look at this and let me try over here. Okay. So patient stage of disease is mapping to this. Different subgroups over here. Let's see, 2 is mapping to patient's ages means this. But again, you don't need to worry about this over here. It's just when you look at this, and again, that's why it's not testing you. So forget about it. I just go sometimes a bit too deep. So let's go back to our questions over here. Okay. So let's look at our main point question. So what's going on throughout the paragraph? How many of you have gone through the main point files over here? Let's just do a quick check. How many of you have gone through the main point files? Okay. Some of you have, a few have not. So one of the things that we teach you on the main point files is how do you get what we call as these paragraph summaries. And if you've not gone through the main point files, I would recommend that you go through it. They're a part of your free trial. Okay. So what is paragraph 1 doing? Paragraph 1 says, hey, we've got to move towards such simpler trial. Why? Because the risk is not going to go up. It'll reduce the cost. and the author really and the author explains the current scenario where we are collecting way more information than is strictly required. Paragraph 2 asks us to go towards this larger trial. Okay, why? Because we can obtain a much more representative sample of the total population, and instead of a two-step process, in a single step, we'll get efficacy on basically both the effectiveness of this treatment for diverse patients under various conditions, and we'll be able to evaluate it for different patient samples. So the benefits of that. So if I were to summarize over here, so we're talking about benefits of doing a simpler trial, benefits of doing a larger trial. There are these two proposals which are there, and the author describes those two things. So essentially, I do my pre-thinking. Even before I look at the answer choices, I really do my pre-thinking and say it's a two-pronged proposal to improve medical research that is explained to me. Okay, everyone good with this pre-thinking? That's that's something that we're doing with this in this passage over here. Okay, let's look at how you guys did on this. 61% of you got this right, but 76 of you got this right over here. So let's look at the various choices. Choice A really says identifying two practices that may affect the accuracy of trials. Okay. Now the thing which is there is, we don't talk about the accuracy of clinical trials at all. To really say, hey, the trials will become more accurate over there. And again, the purpose of the passage is not to identify the two practices that may affect the accuracy. The purpose is to describe a proposal over here. When you think about what the author is doing, he's describing a proposal. Very few people did choice B, so I'm not going to worry about choice B. Choice C, a lot of you chose choice C, and then you've got to look at this. This is what I call as a three-dimensional choice. So when you look at this, you've got to segment this answer choice. Certain shortcomings of current medical practices. Okay. And what this, if you chose choice C, what you chose is that in this passage, what we are doing is we're evaluating what an analysis of certain shortcoming, which means that, hey, there are certain shortcomings that are there. And then, oh, sorry, I messed up the wrong one. Okay. And then we are evaluating that analysis of shortcomings, of those shortcomings. Are we evaluating any analysis in this? We're talking about choice C. Are we evaluating any analysis? Are we talking about the pros and cons of any analysis in this, in the short answer poll? No, we are not talking about the pros and cons of any analysis. So we are not, which is where choice C is wrong. We're not evaluating any analysis. Oh, C is labeled as D on screen. My bad. I'm sorry. This is choice C over here. Okay. Choice D, which is describing proposed changes to ways in which clinical trials are conducted. That is correct. There are certain proposed changes. The author describes what those changes are and to ways in which what clinical trials are conducted. So that's correct. Choice E, we don't know if this is likely to change. We are just describing. Okay. That's there. So we don't know about this in this case. So for those of you, about 61% of you got this right. For those of you who chose one of the other options, do you know where you made a mistake or why you made a mistake? Let's get to question 2. We're going to talk about timing over here. Let's look at question 2. Let's just spend some time. Question 2 says, which of the following can be inferred from the passage about a study of the category of patients referred to in the lines? Often, researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. So essentially, this is about the current way of doing things, and the author is saying, what can we infer about from the passage about the study of the category of patients? These are those ideal patients that we are talking about over here. Okay, and here is the passage over here, and the author says often the author is Researchers restrict participations to patients with no ailments besides those being studied, or treatment which is judged successful under these conditions can then be evaluated. So when you look at this part over here, you say, okay, this is a two-step process. This ideal group is something which doesn't give me very broad results. It gives me some very limiting results. It's just a passing gate over here. Okay, so the choice with choice A is correct. 54% of you got it right. Let's look at options which you guys chose, which are popular. Choice C, it would be the best way to sample the total population of potential patients. Those who chose choice C, how did you get this? Because the proposal really is to really get to a broader set of patients over here. So if you're thinking about this, you're kind of going in the opposite direction. If you chose choice D over here, then choice D is talking about mentions information from paragraph 1. Data collection is not mentioned in this context over here. Limiting data connection is mentioned in paragraph 1, not in paragraph 2. You actually mixed up the scope of two paragraphs over here. Folks who chose choice D, there are 32 of you who chose choice D. Can you see where you made a mistake? People who chose choice D, D for Delta. Okay. Choice E talks about the findings would be more accurate. It compares actually progressive disease versus non-progressive disease. The passage doesn't talk about a comparison of or accuracy of a certain way of doing this kind of testing for progressive versus non-progressive. Again, the accuracy of findings comparing progressive versus non-progressive, you can't really do that. Okay. Vakas says didn't get the explanation for choice C. It would be the best way to sample. Choice C says this is the best way to sample the total population of potential patients. Actually, what FNM proposes is to expand that sample because this is not the best way. So this is going just in the opposite direction. Okay. Sriram says when a few people with a few elements are selected, doesn't it imply that information collection is without increasing risk? Sriram, if there were no risk, then why would we need the second stage of trial? Would we need a second stage of trial if there were no risk? Yes, no? Remember, go back over here. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated. If all the risks were covered, why would you need that second step over here? And this entire paragraph, which is there on top of this, is actually about saying if you broaden the range of this thing, trial participants, then you'd be able to get all of these insights, which means you're covering that risk. Okay, let's go to question number 3. Question 3 is a very interesting question where you had to read the question statement to get to the right answer. Question 3 says, it can be inferred from the passage that a study limited to patients like those mentioned in the lines, often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied, would have which of the following advantages. So the question really is, it's saying based on look at the answer choices and tell me that if I only enroll the ideal set of patients who have just that one disease but otherwise are not suffering from any other complication, what would be the advantage of enrolling just those participants over enrolling the kind of participants that FNM are proposing. Okay. All right. So what you're really saying is, in the current way, we are restricting participations to patients who have no other ailments. In the proposed way, we have to increase the size of trial. We're pretty much enrolling patients who have just those ailments, a few other ailments, who may be at different ages, and so on and so forth. over here. All right. Again, you can see what the given way versus this thing is. Okay, let's look at the answer choices. Choice C is the correct one. 56% of you got it right. Choice A is also a popular incorrect answer choice. Choice A says if you limit participation to those patients, it would yield more data. Again, yielding more data, you can't infer it. I don't know how you got that. And the findings would be more accurate. Again, we can't infer it. Accuracy isn't mentioned. Yielding more data isn't mentioned over here. That part is only in paragraph 1. Very few people chose choice B, so I'm not going to mention that. Choice C is the correct answer. It says it would limit the number of variables. Yes, if you patients only have those elements, then you won't have these other variables such as age, such as the stage of disease and others that you'd have to worry about. So it limits the number of variables that patients would have to consider while evaluating the treatment and the study. Let's look at choice D. Choice D is actually the opposite. You would choose choice D if you didn't read the question. People who chose choice D, did you guys read the question properly? Because this is just the opposite. Choice D is about people, is about the proposed study, not the current way of doing things. Okay. Experimental treatments are not mentioned over here. Again, we don't know anything about an experimental treatment. Sorry about that. Let's go back. So experimental treatment not mentioned over here. Again, you can't infer anything about it. So for those of you who made a mistake, half of you made a mistake. Where did you guys make a mistake, and what's your takeaway from this question? What's your takeaway from this? How would limiting the number of variables is an advantage? It's not. So when you're reading the advantage over here, let me just get your name. What you are inferring is an advantage with regards to accuracy of this PB. Is that correct? When you're reading an advantage, when you're talking about this PB, you're saying, oh, how would this lead to a more accurate, yield to a more accurate result? Is that how you're reading this? Yes, no? If you're reading it that way, that's not the right way. When you say advantage, it means the benefit. What's one benefit that it would have? The benefit that it would have is to researchers, they'd have to look at fewer variables. Right? That's the benefit. That's a true benefit. That's something that you can infer. That must be true based on the information given in the passage. Remember, what did I say about inference questions? This must be true. This is an advantage of this. Why? Because that expanded study, the proposed study, will have way more variables. So this is an advantage. Oh yeah, it's a benefit. What is one benefit? So think about any proposed change that you do, right? Let's say you go in manufacturing and you really say, hey, I'm going to actually, instead of manufacturing this screw in 3 steps, I'm going to actually manufacture in 4 steps. Why? Because by doing that, I'm going to really get to my hit rate from 90% in 3 steps to 99% in 4 steps. So if you did that, then you'd be okay to say, hey, the 4-step process, even though gives me a better yield, the 3-step process has the advantage that it has fewer steps, right? Even though the 4-step process gets a better yield, the 3-step process has the advantage of fewer steps. Would that be the correct inference? Yes, that is an advantage of fewer steps. It may not matter in the decision making, but it does have an advantage. You can't refute that. Is that clear? PB, is that clear? Yeah. So again, remember, what is an inference? Eric has a great question. It says it's a 700 level passage. Would you have to answer all 4 to be in that 90th percentile. If you get 4 out of 5 correctly, you are kind of a candidate for it. Yes, they're proposing to make it bigger. What's the advantage of skimming through the passage rather than doing the in-depth reading? What's the advantage of skimming through the passage rather than doing that in-depth reading? No, what's the advantage? You'll read the passage in less time, right? You'll read the passage in less time. That's true. In the end, it might not, you'd not score high, that it might lead to that disadvantage, but skimming through the passage, you definitely go through the passage in less time. That's an advantage. You save time for reading the passage, not for solving the question, but for reading the passage. So I'm just trying to tell you the semantics of advantage. If I ask you what's the advantage of skimming through the passage, you'll say, okay, I'll get through the passage in less time. Yes, does it lead to an eventual advantage that you care about? No. But it doesn't mean that skimming through the passage does not have that advantage. Okay. So let's go to question 4. Question number 4 over here. 66% of you got it right. So let's kind of go through this. This is a purpose question. The question says the passage mentions patients' ages. What is the purpose of mentioning ages may also affect a treatment's efficacy? Why does the author mention this? That's all that he's asking over here. And the reason why the author mentions this is to really provide an example, to really say, hey, what's the benefit of enrolling a large variety of patients? It's an example of the benefit that it would give. And let's look at the answer choices. A and B, very few of you used. Choice C, a lot of you said choice C. It says indicate why progressive diseases may require different treatments at different ages. Can you tell me why progressive diseases require different treatments at different ages? Does the passage tell you, no, my kidney isn't working for if I'm in stage 3 versus if I'm in stage 1? So that's why progressive diseases require different treatments at different stages. Does the passage tell you that? Does it tell you the reason why a progressive disease requires? No, it doesn't. So why did you choose choice C? For those of you who chose choice C, how did you read this statement? How did you read it? I'm also funny. I've got to. I mean, this is. I've been working since 4 in the morning on various things. So if I'm not funny, then if I don't have fun here, then where will I have fun? No, but do you know the reason why different people, progressive diseases may require different treatments at different ages? You know that as a fact. Do you know the reason why that is the case? No, you don't know the reason. Choice D is the correct answer. A good chunk of you got it, 66%. Illustrate a point about the value of enrolling a wide range of patients. You can really figure that out, that progressive diseases may require different treatments at different stages. You may figure that fact out. You may not figure out the causality why that happens, but you will figure that fact out to really say this treatment's way more effective for people who are at stage 1 than at stage 3. You may not figure out why that's the case. Okay. Choice C, very few people have chosen, so I'm not going to worry about it. But again, when you're reading something, understand, you read that answer choice and don't just jump to it and say, man, this seems correct. Just say, what is this answer choice telling me? Visualize that. If you don't visualize that, you're going to fall in traps. And you fall in the trap, you're going to answer that question incorrectly, despite doing all that hard work of reading the passage. Okay. Question 5. This is where, where the accuracy was the lowest. Let's get to question 5. Here is how you guys answered. You guys can really see that over here. This is a detailed question. The question says, according to the passage, which of the following describes an outcome? Result means an outcome of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials. So this is what I call as a global detail. Why? Because we've talked about clinical trials all throughout the paragraph, and so it could either be in paragraph 1 or in paragraph 2. So let's kind of look at this over here. Paragraph 1 is where the author really says, hey, a lot more data is collected, and as a result the costs are higher and there's some wastage of money over there. Paragraph 2 says it's a two-step process where initially we only look at ideal conditions, so application in real life is fairly limited. Either of these is a result of how we currently do trials. Look at the pre-thinking piece. Does that make sense? Either this or this. Either of these is an outcome of how we currently do trials, which is what the author is asking us to do. And at a very high level, when you have this, when you go in the passage, you're going to be that much more confident answering questions. Okay. Choice A is the correct answer. Okay. Choice A says they expend resources on storage of information that is likely to be relevant to the study when they're conducting. 31% of you chose choice A. Let's look at choice D. Choice D says they avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might impact their findings, even though doing so raises their research cost. Do they avoid? What does avoiding something mean? When you take a road, when you avoid a road, what does that mean? When you avoid a road, what does it mean? It means you don't take that road, right? So when you avoid the risk of overlooking variables, this means you actually don't overlook variables. Okay, let's look at the passage over here. Let me just bring the notes back. Where is my passage? My passage is over here. Let's look at this line. F&M contend that such risk never entirely eliminable from research. If that risk is never entirely eliminable, then can they avoid it? Okay, even by collecting all of those variables. I mean, this entire portion is about the fact that, hey, even when you limit research, there is not going to be that much risk. Limit variables, I'm sorry. Okay, so which is why choice C is wrong. Choice D, if you chose choice D, you are actually mixing two independent things that are mentioned in the passage. So there's a causality here in choice D, which is really important to understand. Because they attempt to collect too much information, they overlook facts that could emerge irrelevant to their studies. How did you get that? That they would overlook facts if they collect too much information. The only outcome of collecting and analyzing too much information, okay, the only relevance of collecting too much information is the increase in cost. In choice A, why is the information irrelevant? It's given in the passage, buddy. It's here. Let's get to my passage once again. Here is my passage over here. Currently, researchers collect far more information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. If it's far more than is strictly required, what does this mean? It's more than required, then what does it mean? They are overdoing it. It's irrelevant. Yes, it's likely irrelevant. Yes, generally means the current practice or the common practice. All right. Okay, so we are done with this passage. Again, the point that I wanted to illustrate about this is that as you get to reading the passage, and a lot of us say, I'm going to read 10 passages today, I'm going to read 15 passages today, or I'm going to read 3 passages today. I think the focus that we have on reading passages is about on quantity. When you go through quantity, you don't understand why you got something right. You don't understand why you got something wrong, which means you don't get the causality. And when you don't get the causality, then that practice doesn't help you improve. And you want to make sure that with every passage you practice, you improve. Because only then you can get to that 90th percentile. Now, when you practice a lot, initially it may seem good. Why? Because a lot of, a good chunk of improvement happens when you practice. But that gets you only to that 60th, 70th percentile. It doesn't help you beyond that. Okay. How many of you have actually experienced that, done a lot of practice and are stuck at that 60th, 70th percentile? Okay. Despite a lot of practice. Again, to get to that 730 score, this is what you need, that 90th percentile. Okay. And I still see people asking, how do you save time during the reading phase? You don't. You don't save time. You save time while solving questions because you spend time during the reading phase. I mean, how many of you think the GMAT's a test of timing? How many of you think that? Why? Why is it a test of timing? Why would be a test that is supposed to be an indicator of how you're going to perform in business school be a test of timing? Why would that be the case? Business involves making decisions quickly? Really? Okay. How many of you are from India over here? And again, I'm going to give a very India specific example right now. How many of you are from India over here? Okay. Which is the biggest cell phone company in India right now? And one of the most profitable? No, about amongst the networks. Among the networks. When I say cell phone, I'm sorry, the networks. Sorry about that. Jio. When did Jio enter the cell phone race in India? How many years post the incumbents entered? Okay. How many of you know of Gmail? How many of you are aware of the email tool called Gmail? Everyone is. Was it the first email to market? Which was the first email to market? AOL was one of the first ones. MSN was one of the first ones. Sabir Bhatia sold MSN. Yahoo was way before Gmail. Netscape, I don't know if it was as big an email provider. But when you say business is about making decisions quickly, is business about making decisions quickly? Or is business about making the right decisions with that foresight? Yes. Timing does matter, but the GMAT's not a test of speed. It's a test of logic. Now, when you look at this, and one thing that you should really look at is, and go to GMAT Club's review section, look at the number of reviews. I'm going to challenge you to look at two things. One is A, the number of reviews, B, the frequency of reviews. Then you go to YouTube channel and you look at the number of debriefs over there, and you look at the frequency with which these unedited interviews are being posted. And then you really ask, why is it that other prep companies don't have that many debriefs or reviews and so on and so forth? And I think the question that you're going to find is that, the reason why our students are more successful is because we focus on building that ability. For us, timing starts to matter when you are at V35. Or let me just say this. If you can prove to me that you can get to that 75th to that 78th percentile, that's when I worry about timing. If you can't get to the 75th percentile, you're wasting your time worrying about timing. If you're at the 30th percentile, why do you care about timing? Okay. Thank you. I will try. We actually have, I think, about 6 or 7 right in the pipeline for publishing. We're always about 15 days behind with regards to publishing. But coming back to this, I think the thing that I want you to take away is if you're not at that 75th percentile, don't even bother about timing, because timing is not going to get you to that 75th percentile. If you're at that 75th percentile, and if timing is limiting you, why? Because even at 75th percentile, you could have a specific weakness that is limiting you. And that's where Scholarinium's analytics come in place. But at 75th percentile or higher, timing starts to be a factor too. That's one of the possible causes. Okay. So the first thing which is there is you need to master the method when it comes to acing GMAT RC. So for those of you who are really saying, when I solve the question without timing, the accuracy is way high. Are you able to excel in hard cementing quizzes? If you're able to excel in hard cementing quizzes, then write to one of our customer success experts, and they'll help you the way they've helped countless students do that. Okay. But if you can't excel in hard cementing quizzes, don't come to us for timing. Okay. So Abhishek, I just gave you, how do you know you're at 75th percentile? If you're able to do that well in hard cementing stage, then come to us for timing. If you're faltering on medium cementing, don't come to us for timing, because you have other problems to fix. Okay. So to get to that 75th percentile, you've got to read slowly. And that's something that I want to tell you. And I'm going to give you data. If anything I claim, I'm going to back it up with data. First, let me just explain the claim. If you spend 4 minutes, if you speed, okay, how long is a GMAT RC? How many words? Typical RC passage. It's about 300 to 350 words. Okay, 250 is a short passage. 300 to 350 is an average passage. The longest I've seen is about 420 words or so. Okay, so now the average person, how many words does an average person read and comprehend properly? It's actually, most people do 140 or so, not 40 per minute. No, 40 per minute is is essentially very slow. People speak at about 40 to 45 words per minute. They read and comprehend a lot faster. So bottom line which is there is, for most passages, you can read and comprehend in 3 minutes. If you follow the reading strategies, if you read slowly. For the first 10 passages, the problem that I have with people is they say, okay, 3 minutes, the first passage that they read, they want to achieve those 3 minutes. No. The key to getting to that 3 minutes with 100% comprehension is to spend about 8 minutes per passage in the first 10 passages, is to identify each and every keyword in the first 10 passages, is to look at all the transitions in the first 10 passages, is to read and summarize. What happens when you do that? When you spend 8 minutes per passage in the first 10 passages, your keywords start to become second nature. You can automatically read and summarize. That's what I want you to do. You do that, by the time you read that 7th or 8th passage, you're going to find, man, 8 minutes is too many. Even if I cannot spend more than 5 minutes. Why? Because there's nothing more to extract from there. You guys remember the time you first learned how to tie a shoelace? How long did it take for you to learn how to tie a shoelace? How long did it take? Very long. It is a very complex thing. It took me 3 months to learn how to tie a shoelace. By the way, I did not spend a good chunk of 3 hours. Otherwise, I think I would have done it in 3 hours. But yes, but when you first learned how to tie a shoelace, you actually had to give it your complete attention. You had to really see, okay, how did my first knot go? How am I looping the lace? Am I kind of getting it through the hole properly and all of that stuff? What happened when you did it 20 to 30 times? You could do it without looking at it, right? You could do it without, it became second nature. That's the same thing with RC. You spend more time on those first 10 passages. Look at the keywords, look at the solutions that we provide, look at how we identify those things. You're going to find this starts to become second nature. The wrong thing to do is to expect, hey, I'm going to do that first passage and I'm going to get there in 3 minutes. That's the wrong thing. But first thing is to make it that second nature. And when that happens, you're going to start hitting that 3 minute mark. Now, for some passages which are more challenging, more dense, you'll have to slow down and you'll need about 4 minutes. Now, in either case, what's going to happen is you should be able to answer questions in a minute. In fact, today, about 50% of you are doing that even today. And you guys are about 120 students here right now. Some of you, while answering questions in this passage, were done in 45 seconds, right? Some of you waited for me to close the poll. Did that happen with a few of you? Where you said, hey, I'm done in 45 seconds. I don't know why is Rajat not moving to that next question. Because you read the passage well. And you already have people who are there who are reading that well. Okay. Either way, for this group where the passage is not uber difficult, you'd be able to get there in 7 minutes per passage. Where the passage is uber difficult, you'd be able to get there in 8 minutes per passage over there. So bottom line is read for comprehension and don't read for time over here. Here's an example of a student who went to Columbia Business School. You can actually go to LinkedIn, you can see where she's working right now. And she said, you should read all the text, not only the first and last sentence. As long as you understand the whole paragraph, it takes only 30 to 50 seconds to answer each question. The more you read, the greater is your skill. But when she says the more you read, she means with that SC or RC hat. Okay. And she really says, read with what e-GMAT calls the SC hat. We talked about Nishant earlier, who was rejected at a 690, then got into Columbia with a 740 with a bunch of scholarship over here. See, he says, what you have to realize is that you have enough time to cover all the questions. Do not stress about timing at all. Take 3+ minutes to read, understand, and comprehend a short passage, and 4+ minutes for a long passage. And with this investment strategy, he was able to answer questions in this amount of time. And again, I'm not asking you to believe me. Let me share the debriefs. You guys can actually click on this and get to their debriefs. I think Nishant's debrief also gives you his ESR, where you can see that timing over here. This is a screenshot from his ESR. He took about 2 minutes per RC question. And his ability was really high in RC. Here's another example of a guy who's really good in English. His name is Dr. Rohit Singh Malan. He is an IDES officer, which means he cleared the IAS exam in India. And he took the GMAT the first time without using e-GMAT. He scored a V27. He said, in case of RC, I was supposed to read the passage multiple times. I did not understand the passage the first time around. Then when he started applying reading strategies, he was able to get to a V41. And this is what caused that over here. So if you are an e-GMAT student, make sure you start with understanding how do we build the damn sentence over here that makes things complex. What are the various building blocks? How do you build a long sentence? How do you deconstruct it over here? Then understand how do you read that long sentence, which is where you go to these pause points over here. And then you get into the reading strategies. For those of you who are e-GMAT students, we also have pay RC batches for our paid students, in which we have 2 sessions just for reading strategies over here. Make sure you enroll in RC batches. Okay. So in addition to going through these concepts, you have about another 7 to 8 hours of reading strategies only. Then this will give you short passages like the ones that we did early on in this webinar. We make you go through about 20 to 25 of those, and we actually stress your brain on the kind of comparisons, on the usage of keywords and all of that stuff. And after that, inference becomes second nature to you. So go through reading strategies, go through every question specific module in the course. Okay. And spend 30 minutes on that main point concept. Look at how we are extracting. Don't just be happy with answering the questions correctly. Make sure you get them right for the right reason. You heard someone say, hey, please don't stop doing these YouTube interviews. The reason why people love those YouTube interviews is because you get to see how did people course correct themselves while studying, because no one gets to that 750, 770 score just by saying, okay, I'm going to open a book, I'm going to read the chapter, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to watch a concept and I'm going to be done with it. No, everyone, to get to that 98, 99th percentile, everyone needs to iterate. And when you look at those iteration journeys over there, that's when you really say, okay, this is how they figured out where to iterate. This is how they did iterate over there. And one of the key things that you would really consistently see over here is that are getting answers right for the right reasons. It's not sufficient to just get answers right. Okay. So what do successful students do? They get immersed and visualize. They don't worry about timing. They worry about saying, can I understand what the author is trying to communicate over here? Can I visualize what the author is saying? And they use the reading strategies and they to make sure that they can truly visualize this over here. And to iterate, they look at data, and because that helps them figure out where they need to put in this effort. Again, we talked about the study plan. I think you probably have already booked that. If you haven't booked that study plan session, you can book that over here. And again, with regards to those video interviews that I've just talked about, let me also share that over here. So those were all debriefs, but these are video interviews where you can watch their journeys in this. All right, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this session. Let me just take on the questions over there. How do you know if you're doing well in hard cementing? 60% or higher accuracy is good enough in hard cementing. So if you take a hard cementing quiz, you score higher than 60%. That's good enough. Let me also share the session PDF with you over here. Yes, let me get the session PDF. Here is the session PDF. You can download that. Again, you probably won't be able to download it on a mobile device, but on a regular browser, you should be able to. What's the time period to be ready for the GMAT? It depends on what your starting point is. So I would recommend take a Sigma X mock and then schedule a session with one of our counselors, and they can really tell you how long it will take. Everyone takes a different amount of time. Again, if you go to a YouTube channel, you would really see, for example, if you watch Nishant's interview, you will see that everyone takes a different amount of time to get there. So some people get there in a week, or others take 3 months. So let me actually share a link to our diagnostic test, which gives you these ability scores in SCCR and RC. And by the way, here is another article. It's a research article that we wrote last year, which says what causes success on GMAT. This is a research report that we published in which we analyze upwards of 400,000 data points. So you can take a look at this over here. When should you take a diagnostic test? Right before you start your preparation. Let me just do that. Let me give you a link to our Sigma X mock over here. Here's a link to the Sigma X mock. Any good suggestions on admission consultants? I can suggest about 4 or 5 of you, for 4 or 5 admission consultants. So write to me. So if you want to know off the top of my head, I would recommend Poonam at My Essay Review if she's still available. A lot of good admission consultants actually are booked right now. So I think if you send me an email saying who, if you're an e-GMAT student especially, who all have you approached and who all have really said sorry they can't work with you, then I can tell you the remaining. How do you know that a level of a question is hard? You don't figure that out. You just look at the official classification from OG or from us. So yeah, don't make that judgment. I mean, for us to make that judgment, we have to do trials. Even we can't make that judgment over here. Let me just show you. So here is a video over here that explains that how we figure out which questions are hard. Okay. All right, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was wonderful having you here. Wish you good luck. Study well for the GMAT. And I will see you on e-GMAT.com.